All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this month's Dr. Sound Academy. As it states on the slide, this month we'll be going over part two of our new VX3000 unveiling, our public address and voice evacuation system. We're joined again by Keith, who's taking lead on this, and he'll be resident expert telling you all about the configurations and compatibility that the VX3000 series has to offer you. Without further ado, I guess we can get started with this month's webinar.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Just in advance warning, my voice is a bit cracky today, so just bear with me. My name is Keith. I am the product development manager at TOA Canada. I'll be presenting to you part two of the VX3000 public address voice evacuation system, going into detail on certain aspects of the VX3000 compared to the last webinar. So for today, we will do a quick overview, a review of what we discussed last time, but more emphasis on certain detail and more details on the frame input, output, and configuration, the power supply setup for the VX3000, and an overall survey of the functions that are available for the VX3000 that may be applicable to your applications. And then we will move on to questions and answers. So to start to review the VX3000 series, we mentioned last time that it's a network-based system, only digital and decentralized. So there's no main server. You can scale it up as many as you want, and you can configure it to pretty much the exact requirements of your system, either wattage-wise or size-wise. And you can expand to a broad number of zones. What we didn't mention last time is the maximum configuration for the system. So I have here the exact figures for the maximum scale of this VX3000 series. You can add up to 160 VX3000 frames. That's the 4-channel, 8-channel, or 16-channel frames. You can connect up to 1,280 remote microphones. That is the input microphones for control and paging. You can add up to 1,920 external audio sources. And you can also record on each frame a total of almost 1,000 or so messages. The zones is quite big. You can go up to 2,500 and quite a lot of input and output controls. So it's really, really scalable. So let's go over quickly the input outputs of each individual frame. That way you get a better idea of what you're dealing with on the frames, because the frame is the core of the VX3000 series. So here is the display of all the common front, the front of all the frames. That's either 4-channel, 8-channel, or 16-channel frames. So on the top right-hand side, you'll see the power, run, and emergency status LEDs. Indicates power status, whether the CPU is running, emergency status, whether it's been triggered, and the CPU power on and off. Also on the bottom of it, it shows the LAN activity of your ports A and B. RS link, which is the port that is used for connecting the microphones, is also indicated there to indicate whether those mics connected to this particular frame is active. For indications, there is a fault indicator on the front of the frame. So it allows for easy and quick diagnosis if there is any failure on the device. So you can see fuse status failure indicator, power failure indicator, CPU failure indicator, a general indicator. It doesn't fall in any of those categories. Unit failure, network failure, and the emergency management or emergency mic, if there's one connected, it also monitors that if it's failing. And some buttons here for acknowledging the failure status, resetting them if you want to reset the device. Say you troubleshoot it and you want to reset and see if that failure goes away. And then the lamp test is when you want to test the light at the back of the device. Also, there's also failure status for failure indicators for the individual speakers. So the VX3000 has the capacity to monitor each individual speaker line that's connected to the four modules that are, or to any module connected to it. And so you can monitor whether there's any failure or any issues on the speaker lines. So each amplifier also has a as an LED indicator for peak signal operation, whether each module is operational, power, and signal status of the modules connected to it. So if this is a 4-channel frame, it will indicate 4 modules. If this is the 8-channel frame, this will only indicate 1, 2, and 3. And the same is with the 16-channel frame. So if you take off the front panel, you will expose an additional set of controls on the VX3000. So you'll see here, when you install a module, this is where you actually can connect the ribbon cable that is available on the modules. Also, there is an LCD that indicates, depending on the code that is shown there, the IP address setting and how to, whether you want to indicate it or not. So I mentioned earlier, impedance monitoring. The VX3000 has a feature to measure the initial impedance of the line connected to it, and then use that as a reference for monitoring in case there's a failure of the line later on. So this is the button to initialize that. Each individual frame has to have an independent ID, so these knobs allow you to configure which ID is for this particular frame, so that when you connect them to the network, there isn't any conflict and one device is distinguished from the other. There's of course a reset button here to reset the device. And finally, if you want to adjust manually the input gains of the individual output speaker output channels, you can adjust them as well over here. So looking at the back of the VX3000, you'll see this common on all of the VX3000 frames. Of course, your standard audio inputs, there's 4 of them for each frame. That's a balanced audio input, by the way. So it's hot, cold, and earth, 3 wired. That's 600 ohms, I believe. The RS link, as I mentioned earlier, is the connector for the microphone. This can be fanned out to connect up to 8 remote microphones per frame. So 4 for each connector over here. This is an RJ45 connector that you can break it out using a specific accessory and then connect up to 8 frames to it, or 8 microphones to it. The analog link connector here, this is more for as a backup. So if you have multiple frames and all of them are connected to the network and you want to have a hardwire backup from each to connect each device to the other in case there's a failure and they're on the same rack and you want redundancy for that, you can use this analog link for connectivity between the close proximity frames. The DS link is the power monitor surveillance connector designed for the VX3000. This is used mainly for the VX2000 DS, which will be the distributor, which will be discussed later on. Control inputs for the VX3000 is available. You have both emergency control in and the regular control inputs for the VX3000. These are open BJT transistors that you can trigger as inputs. Open sync, I believe. There's also fixed control outputs that are dedicated for CPU status, general faults, the status of the each individual line. You can configure that on the controller software. Open collector control outputs also available on the VX3000. If you want to use that for any third-party device, there's also for each individual frame, which I'll show you later on, actual dedicated relays for use for higher wattage and higher powered applications. And I mentioned earlier the control inputs for surveillance. Say you want to monitor the status of a state of the system, then you can put in and program surveillance monitoring so that when that state is active, then the control inputs will be triggered. And then finally, the redundant LAN ports. There's 2 ports available for redundancy. So what's the difference between the 3 frames, so the 8-channel, 4-channel, and the 16-channel frames? Basically, all of them differ in the number of relay line outputs and the speaker outputs that they have. So for the VX3004, it has 8 speaker line outputs. These are A and B lines, so there's For one module, there's a 1A and then there's a 1B, so it's split into two. This is just to avoid too much wiring going on to one module. It also has 8 relay outputs, as I mentioned earlier, and a standby amplifier bus, which you can connect to another amplifier in case that you want a redundant amplifier for a failover. The 8-channel frame has the also 8 speaker line outputs. These are for the individual 8 speaker selection lines, and then 8 relay outputs, and then 2 extension buses, as opposed to 1 compared to the 3004. The 16-channel frame expands that to 16 speaker line outputs and 16 relay channel, and 1 standby amplifier bus and 1 extension bus for backup. So big question on the VX3000 is, what's the power configuration of it? It's not, so the VX3000 out of the box works on a 24 volt to 30 volt system. So if you have a PLC or an industrial system that has its built-in power supply, it can easily connect to that. But what about if you don't have that? So here's the option that we provide as a package from TOA. We recommend powering the system in North America using the manual RCP series 24 volt system. So you have the RCP-1UI, that's the one that has regular power cords, and it can hold up to 3 RCP-1000 24 volt power supply modules. So you have the flexibility to expand or just use one module if that system doesn't need that. Each module can supply up to 40 amps at 24 volt. That means 160 watts for each module. And then times 3, so that's about give or take around 2,700, give or take. So how do you distribute it to the individual modules and the individual frames? That's where the VX3000 comes in. So it receives the power supply on its power supply input connectors, and then distributes it to the respective frames. Now, yes, you can fan out to the individual frames and modules, amplifier modules, so to power them directly and parallel connect them to the power supply. So what's the advantage of the VX3000DS? Remember the power monitoring that I mentioned earlier? Power status and surveillance monitoring. This is where that comes in. You can connect this via the DS-Link power connector so that the VX3000 system can actively monitor the power status of the power supply and the individual status. So in case there's a short on one of the amplifier channels, that will, first of all, it will be protected by the VX3000DS because there's huge protection on this. It will completely shut it off. It's completely isolated from the rest of the other components of the system connected to it. And at the same time, you can monitor it and trigger, say, an email or a alarm contact trigger to notify your system manager that there is a failure on one of the devices and that they can attend to the issue as soon as possible. In addition to that, the VX3000DS also allows for built-in battery backup. So there's available trickle charging, and you can connect a 24 volt battery system to it. So if you have, say, 2 12 volt batteries, you can connect those in series and connect them to the system. And in case there's a power failure, this will automatically switch over to the battery backup and then power the rest of the VX3000 when that happens. So here is a short, a small illustration on how to connect the manual RCP system to the VX3000 DS and the rest of the VX3000 system. So you can see the battery connected to the VX3000 DS and how the power supply is connected to the VX3000 DS and how it's being distributed to the individual frames and modules of the VX3000. So after that, let's discuss shortly the basic functionalities available on the VX3000. We didn't really get into in-depth on this on the last webinar, so I'd like to discuss this and see you and help you appreciate where the functionalities that are available to it and where you can utilize the VX3000 for projects and applications. So audio broadcasting, of course, that's the purpose of this public announcement system. You can route any input to any of the outputs of the VX3000 on any frame connected to the system. You can start with small events for, say, discussion support and music and speech reinforcements for local applications, or if you have a big location, you can broadcast them and distribute it to your warehouse across multiple buildings and facilities. Although this is not advisable to be used for, say, a live event application because of the higher than acceptable latency. The latency for this is between 10 millisecond to 20 millisecond, depending on your network connection. So that's one consideration. So for public announcement, there's of course paging involved in it. There's the option to fade in and fade out the background music while paging, and also ducking when paging the particular zones to it. So going further with audio broadcasting, you can route, as mentioned earlier, route any source to any output. You can adjust the knobs, the gain of the source by adjusting the rotary knobs that I showed earlier, or setting it on the setting software that is available for the VX3000. So background music patterns can be configured, so you can route background music from one source to multiple zones and then activate it by one button click. If there's a general broadcast, just a regular page, you can also trigger that using the RM mic, any of the RM mics. As I mentioned, the flexibility of the VX3000 is unparalleled. You can route any source, any CD tuner, MP3 to any other zones that is available, that is configured in the VX3000 system. Another added feature of the VX3000 is a built-in pre-recorded message. So you don't need an external recorded message recording device to store your emergency messages, your general messages, and your background music if you want that. A total of 1,024 messages can be stored. Each of them is tied to the number of frames that are in your system, of course. The message duration can range from 1.1 to 68 minutes, and then total duration is approximately 60 minutes or so. Playbacks can be programmed on this, whether you want it by repeats, preset number of repeats, or endless repetitions of the message. Audio files are stored in WAV format and with a 48 kilohertz 16-bit depth mono PCM encoded file. You can also have the option to restart messages, or say when you add a zone in a live setup, then you can trigger that message to broadcast to that zone as well. Control inputs. So there's two available control inputs by this. So this is by activation by contact, which is the open sync inputs that you have. And then there's a control by voltage, which monitors the voltage level for the inputs being sent to it. You can program it via pulse, or otherwise known as toggle or edge trigger on the programming software. Set it to respond on a level-based response, or for general and this is applicable for any broadcast, zone volume, trigger it up, down, and attenuation during activation. Activation modes is either make and break, open or close. And you can also program this so that when a contact input is active, a control output is simultaneously triggered, but via the surveillance feature of the device. Control outputs, there's two options available. The open collector transistor, which is limited to 10 milliamps, 28 volts bipolar junction transistor. And there is the much more robust relay contact, which is normally open and normally closed. Both are available for this. Two activation methods, again, pulse or level. And for the relays, you can set them to trigger either normally open or normally closed, however your system would need it. Emergency functions are sequences that you can program into the device you can take the pre-recorded message and program and set a pattern, with how we call it, so that when a cue or a trigger is initiated, say there's a fault that comes out, there's a that particular pattern is played or triggered. Say there's a local emergency that occurs, all the other zones will be overridden, and then the emergency pattern will trigger and play throughout. As mentioned earlier, the VX3000 has a speaker line surveillance. The way it works is via doing an initial reading and initialization. It reads the current impedance of the speaker line that is available, and then you can program a tolerance range that will be a threshold, really, that will be the allowable threshold, such that when that threshold is exceeded, the emergency, either a contact can be triggered or a line failure is triggered. Say it detects both short circuit when there's a 0 to a very low impedance, that's when a short circuit happens, or if there's a break, very high impedance is measured. The indication of the measured impedance will be indicated in the setting software, and the measured impedance values can be extracted and stored for your recording, so that, say, if you want to manually measure the line of the of any of your speaker lines, you have this reference, so you won't need an impedance measurement device to have that as reference. The minimum impedance per speaker line is 1 watt, so there has to be a load on the speaker line for this to happen. The VX3000 also has a hardware for actual live line monitoring, so end of line monitoring, but that is only available for 100 watts. If you are interested in that, we will be happy to discuss that with our tech support once the VX3000 is released. So as mentioned earlier, there's the indication and button controls shown on the front of the device. You can see the active general faults, network faults, so on and so forth, control status. You can do fault acknowledgement and reset, and other indications, so that there's very easy way to determine what is the issue that is being flagged by the system, and then you can actively move towards resolving the issue and thus minimize the downtime of your system. Okay, so that is the gist of it. I will be accepting questions now, so please feel free to raise your questions if you have any.
What frequency is the impedance being tested at?
The impedance, I believe that you can configure it on the software. I don't recall the exact frequencies, the frequency rate that you can specify. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, and the impedance can be scheduled as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's carry on with this. So, before we completely conclude, I do just want to thank everyone who's showed up and stuck around for this webinar. I hope that we're all experts now in the VX3000 series. There's plenty of more than anything we can touch on in just one sitting. If you have any questions about the VX3000 series or any potential applications you think it may fit for, but you're not sure, please reach out to the tech team here or the sales team. We'd be happy to discuss it. We're itching to get these out our doors and over to our anywhere applicable, really. Part that I'm sure everyone's waiting for in high hopes. We have the draw for this month. Again, another pair of F1000 or F-block speakers. I already have the name pulled right now in preparation, so if I just get a bit of a drum roll from everyone. The winner today is Mr. Brian Lisk. I'll be reaching out to you shortly after this webinar, and congratulations. To see whether you'd like a pair of black F1000 speakers or white F1000 speakers. Sorry for,
Well, thank you for that.
no worries. There's always next time for everyone else. We have plenty of F1000s that we give out each month. Speaking of the next webinar, next month we'll be going over yet another new unveiling we have here at TOA. It's going to be the IR842 portable voice lift system. Point of this system is you'll be able to teach and educate anywhere, no longer restricted by a typical classroom setup. Really passionate about this product and excited to be able to give it out across Canada. Thank you everyone for attending today, and I hope you all have a brilliant evening and a brilliant week. Take care.
Dr. Sound. TOA.